Hello, I'm Luca Coasters, and today I'll be reviewing Lech Coaster at Legendia. Lech Coaster is a VEKOMA Bermuda Blitz, which opened in 2017, and after a failed visit to Legendia in 2018, I finally managed to ride this coaster in August 2020. From a visual standpoint, Lech Coaster is stunning. The ride is situated over a huge lake in Legendia, making it amazing for photos, and really making it an icon for the park as well. To get to the ride, you have to travel around the whole park. But when you get there, the area for Lech is beautiful. The theming is high quality and visually appealing, and the waterside setting gives the area a unique feel. I love how the coaster wraps around the area, and it's really intimidating as it seems so tall and has such a big presence. The queue line to the coaster is fairly detailed, with a pre-show towards the end of the queue, but the line was non-existent when I visited the park, and from what I've heard from the experience of others, this coaster rarely has a line. When you get to the station, you can choose your row. What is really cool that the second inversion on the coaster goes through this station, creating a really cool effect, and it really helps to build the anticipation for the ride. I love how well integrated the station fly-through is, and I hope that more coasters can integrate features like this. So the trains themselves are really nice. They aren't as open as the new Intamin trains because of the higher sides, but they're still really comfortable. The vests are easily the best vest restraints on any coaster, as they have a lot of give, and the bars which go over your lap conform to your legs really well, causing absolutely no discomfort. They aren't my favourite trains, but in terms of comfort, they might just be the best. So when you dispatch, you dip down and turn to the right, and whilst doing this, the train vibrates violently. I was surprised by just how rattly this section of the ride was, but it wasn't uncomfortable, and if anything it was just funny, and luckily this rattle doesn't persist throughout the rest of the layout. The train then goes up a fairly fast lift hill, but as it reaches the top it slows down, and that is for good reason. The ride then enters the first 40 metre beyond the vertical twisting drop, and in the front the train crawls over the crest. But since the drop is beyond vertical, when you twist you get a surprising pop of floater. It's nothing outstanding, but still a fun start to the ride. However, in the back you are flung over the crest of the lift hill, getting some amazing ejector, and you are held there, pinned against your restraint, before being thrown to the left, in the twist whilst the airtime gets even stronger, with the only thing catching you being the vest. This drop is so aggressive, and because of the twist, it is easily one of my favourite drops on any coaster. I would say that it's on par with the drop on Expedition G-Force. So if this coaster didn't have vests, honestly, this drop could be a contender for one of my favourite all-time elements. You are then suddenly slammed with positives as you enter the first valley. I love how sudden the transition into the positives is, since it really makes the ride feel dynamic. At this point you also fly through a rock tunnel, but honestly, this part of the ride was such a blur that I never even noticed a tunnel. The positives are so sustained as you rise up into the reverse sidewinder. You just experience constant positives with only a slight relent at the top of the inversion. I actually like how there is a small relent, as it makes the ride feel more dynamic and it makes the positives feel more exciting. Personally, I'm not the biggest fan of constant positives as it can feel boring and uncomfortable, but this section of sustained G-force on Lech is perfectly executed. You then go down the reverse sidewinder and the intense positives continue as you turn and rise up into the twisted hill. This twisted hill is interesting as it is shaped so that there is almost no laterals on the element, so it twists perfectly smoothly in a way that maximises the airtime. The transition into the airtime is fairly sudden, and the airtime itself is fairly strong and sustained. I'd say it's just solid ejector, making for a really fun element as you are thrown into your restraints. You also sustain there for around a second as the train seamlessly twists, making for such a fun and satisfying element. The coaster then enters another valley with strong positives, which are less sustained than the moments prior, but the strength of the positives creates an amazing juxtaposition of forces. The coaster then rises up into a tall straight airtime hill. This hill is really tall with a sharp crest, very similar in shaping to the first along Goliath at Wallaby Holland. So you receive airtime fairly late in the hill, and in the front you get a violent moment of ejector, similar in strength to the previous twisted hill, but in the back it takes slightly longer to build up to the airtime, but overall the airtime is slightly stronger in the back. This moment lasts for just under a second, as unfortunately the exit to the hill is much smaller than the entrance, meaning that the air is less sustained than it could be. This then transitions into the corkscrew through the station. Like most modern VEKOMAs, this inversion isn't too snappy or intense, but there are actually some solid laterals in the second half of the inversion. What really makes this inversion though is the experience of flying through the station and the head choppers, turning what would be an otherwise forgettable inversion into a really cool element. This then leads an intense turning valley into an incline immelnum, which sustains the forces really well, but with a slight relent at the top. The ride then goes through a fairly intense low to the ground turn under some of the track by the lift hill, before rising up into a violent twisted hill. The airtime on this element is really strong, and the transition from positives into airtime is so sudden, making it feel really violent and aggressive. This element just launches you out of your seat, reaching forces around minus 1.4 G, which is just crazy. Unfortunately, the element is not the most sustained, but the sheer strength of the airtime makes up for it. Unfortunately, like the previous twisted hill, it is devoid of laterals, but if you have a look at its pure airtime, then it really delivers. Unfortunately, after this element the ride does die down a bit. The coaster then enters the third and final inversion, a corkscrew, which feels very similar to the corkscrews featured on VEKOMA Space Warps. It has very little force, making it honestly quite forgettable, but then this leads into a forceful turn, which then goes into a solid off-axis hill. This hill provides no force in the front, but in the back there is solid floater which pushes you up slightly, but it's nothing outstanding. The train then dives down into a helix with solid positives, which are actually really sustained, making it a fairly intense element. The helix then rises up before transitioning into another helix via a twisted hill. This twisted hill surprised me on my first few rides, with it delivering a decent pop of air. But on every subsequent ride, this element became more disappointing for some reason. It provides a short pop of strong violent floater, which is a nice surprise, but it's still nothing outstanding. The ride then navigates one final turn, which is quite intense, before rising up into the brake run, which gives no airtime in any rows. So overall, this coaster is amazing, with positives really being the standout, but also featuring some amazing airtime. Force wise, this is one of the most impressive rides I've experienced, but there are a few things which hold this ride back for me. Firstly, the vest restraints. While they are good, they could still be more open, and it does slightly detract from a few elements, especially the drop. So it just makes the ride feel slightly less out of control. Then this isn't helped by the lack of laterals. This is a design trait of newer VEKOMAs, which I can understand as laterals can be uncomfortable for many, but it prevents a ride from being fully extreme. Finally, the pacing. While the first half of this coaster is one of the best sequences of elements on any coaster, the second half is fairly weak, and a disappointing end to an otherwise excellent ride. These three factors make it so that this ride really lacks that out of control feeling which I love on a coaster, which is why I didn't have as much fun on this ride as on the coasters that I rank above it. The raw forces themselves are incredible, but it just lacks that edge which coasters above it have. Nonetheless, this is an amazing coaster, and it has something for everyone. Amazing positives, great airtime, and one of the best first drops out there. And in terms of layout, it is remarkable how it has such a good variety of forces. But I can't overlook that lack of insanity which I really seek in coasters, so I have to give this ride a score of 94 out of 100. It is an incredible coaster, but just not for me. But I know that some people will have this ride as their number one, which I can completely understand, as it is truly incredible, featuring one of the best layouts of any coaster. I highly recommend going out to ride this coaster if you're in Poland, as it's one of Europe's best. And right now, with the lack of these new modern VEKOMAs, it is a really unique coaster, and it would be difficult for VEKOMA to ever top this, let alone any manufacturer. So anyways, I'd love to hear your opinions on this coaster in the comment section down below. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe for more rollercoaster based content.